Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Omar Khalid. But today is the 14th of December 2023, and these are the stories that we'll try to highlight during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the caretaker Prime Minister Environmentalist Kakar Saab's visit to Azad Jammu and Kashmir. And of course, he is there to express solidarity with the Kashmiris in the wake of the biased decision that has come from the Indian Supreme Court as far as Article 370 and 35A are concerned. He also addressed the Azad Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly session. He highlighted the sufferings of the people of Kashmir due to the Indian oppression. He also laid a wreath at the Yadgar-e-Shuhada to pay homage to the valiant soldiers of the armed forces. He also talked to Azad Jammu and Kashmir Prime Minister Chaudhry Anwar al-Haq and Azad Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly Speaker Latif Akbar in Muzaffarabad, saying that the hearts of Pakistanis beat with their Kashmiri brothers and sisters. This, and of course in the whole context of the Supreme Court decision, is something that we are going to highlight in our first story. Then we are going to talk about COP28, and of course we all know that representatives from nearly 200 countries have agreed at the COP Climate Summit to begin reducing global consumption of fossil fuels. That was a whole question mark as far as COP28 is concerned, whether these countries will agree to it or not, and they have finally agreed to reduce the global consumption of fossil fuels and avert the worst of climate change, signaling the eventual end of the oil age. Well, whether that happens or not is again a huge question mark. I would like to say what COP28 President Sultan Al-Jaber said. He said, "You did step up, you showed flexibility, and you put common interest ahead of self-interest." I hope it goes on in the future as well as far as application of these statements are concerned. Then we are going to talk about the US House of Representatives that is going to vote to impeach Joe Biden. There is a formal impeachment inquiry that has begun on the current US President Joe Biden on his son's controversial international dealings. This move also, Joe Biden says, is but a baseless stunt. We'll highlight that. Then we are going to talk about the British data regulator that has said on Wednesday it has fined the Defence Ministry for a series of email data breaches that revealed the inside details of over 265 Afghans who were seeking relocation to Britain after the Taliban took control of Afghanistan. The Information Commissioner's Office said it fined the Ministry of Defence £350,000, saying the department did not have operating procedures that were in place to ensure group emails were sent securely to the Afghan nationals who had worked with the British government. Finally, we're going to talk about scientists in Switzerland, ladies and gentlemen, who have been testing an extra robotic arm that's controlled by breathing. Of all things, it's controlled by breathing without affecting our ability to do other things at the same time. Very interesting, and just see how science is progressing and at what rate. I hope these innovations move humanity forward in the right direction. Let's begin with our first segment, and that concerns our caretaker Prime Minister Environmentalist Kakar Saab's visit to Azad Jammu and Kashmir. He also addressed the AJK Legislative Assembly. He talked about the plight of the Kashmiri people in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Of course, the Supreme Court decision in India concerning Article 370 and 35A. We've been joined by Dr. Mujahid Gillani. He's a Kashmiri leader, a regular guest for our shows, and he's again in the studio. Thank you very much, Dr. Mujahid Gillani, to have joined us. It's a pleasure whenever you are here for our show. Our AJK Prime Minister expresses solidarity with the Kashmiris. How important, after the decision by the Indian Supreme Court, is Pakistan's reiteration of solidarity with its Kashmiri brethren?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. You see, Umar, the unflinching support that we Kashmiris get from Pakistan is unconscionable. We need to understand, and we do accept, as far as the Kashmiris are concerned, we do believe that having the background support of Pakistan, particularly morally, politically, and on the diplomatic channels, is very important. Pakistan is the one who has been highlighting the Kashmir cause and the Kashmir issue internationally, nationally, in the diaspora level, everywhere, I believe, wherever it is necessary. Complaints and grievances aside, the unflinching support of Pakistan is very important, and this visit of the caretaker Prime Minister Kakar to Muzaffarabad, to Azad Jammu and Kashmir, expressing solidarity with the people of Jammu and Kashmir, with the people of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, particularly as they represent the base camp of the whole freedom struggle, I believe is very important. Keeping in view that the Supreme Court of India has just recently given a biased decision about Article 370 and 35A, I believe Prime Minister Kakar's visit to Azad Jammu and Kashmir signifies that Pakistan will stand with the Kashmiris no matter what India thinks of Kashmir, no matter what the Indian judiciary does with Kashmir, no matter what the forces, the terrorist forces of India inside the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir do, Pakistan is going to be at the back of Kashmiris.
Dr. Mujahid, also Anwarullah Kakar Sahab has said India's illegal actions will not shake the struggle of the Kashmiris for their freedom, but will further strengthen it. How strong is the resolve of the Kashmiris in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, of the Kashmiri leaders who've been incarcerated, put in jails, imprisoned and whatnot?
You see, lately I was able to go through a few statements by the Indian authorities, Indian political leaders and of Narendra Modi as well. What they state is that the freedom struggle, particularly the armed resistance in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, started because of Article 35A and 370, which in fact I believe I would rub it off in his face, that the people of Jammu and Kashmir are asking for a very just, fair, right of self-determination.
It's something that has been enshrined to them under all relevant laws. It is under different resolutions of the United Nations as well, wherein this issue is still, not been decided
That is very
upon.
much true. United Nations does gives us an international cover. But if we talk about humanity itself, if I'm supposed to ask you, if I'm supposed to give you a choice, if you want to have tea, if you want to have a glass of water, this is a very simple choice, a very simple
to decide their fate, what they
life.
want to do with the land that they live in, that they call their own.
This is what it is. The people of Jammu and Kashmir, they own that land, they own their lives, they own their livestock. Whatever it is over there, it is completely under the ownership of the Kashmiris on the ground. So if it is so, it is definitely the choice of Kashmiris, and they should have the privilege of deciding whether they want to go with Pakistan or India. So Article 35A and 370 set aside by the Supreme Court of India, or definitely back in 2019 by the so-called representative government of India, we need to understand that the people of Jammu and Kashmir had always been fighting for the right of self-determination and not for the reinstallation of Article 35A and 370. I'll be quoting Dr. Qasim Fakhtu over here, who is in fact the longest serving prisoner in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, apart from the others who have served more than 30 years. Where they said that our fight is not for the Article 35A and 370, but a time will come when the Indian authorities will essentially minimize our struggle and tell the world that this is what the Kashmiris wanted, not the right of self-determination, and we are going to give them statehood again. This is what the Supreme Court of India has directed the government. And once the Supreme Court of India, once the government of India gives the statehood back to the people of Jammu and Kashmir, India is once again going to beat the trumpet that the needs and the requirements, the requests of the people of Jammu and Kashmir have been met.
But they will never be met till such time that they are allowed to decide the fate through the right to self-determination. Our caretaker Prime Minister condemns the Indian state-sponsored terrorism in the region. This is an open truth that the world knows as well, but the world, just like what we see in Palestine, is also keeping mum when it comes to an illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. How can Pakistan or how can the Kashmiri leadership wake the world leaders from this slumber?
That's a very thoughtful question, and I will be really honest about it here, that it's true, Pakistan has been collecting, has been documenting different events and incidents that have occurred in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Even the cross-border terrorism that India is carrying out inside the Azad Jammu and Kashmir. Even in Pakistan, as we see the face of the terrorist Yadav, what's the name of it?
Kulbhushan Yadav.
That's the one. So Kulbhushan Yadav is essentially a face of terrorism that we can present to the world that India has been committing in Pakistan as well. Having all these dossiers, having all these documentations done and all these documentations provided to the movers and shakers of the world, unfortunately we do not see a BDS movement being carried out. That is boycott, divestment and sanction against India. Even the statement that OIC had just released against the decision, against the biased and illegal decision of the Supreme Court of India, was snubbed back by India, stating that it is essentially irrational, illegal and not according to the facts. So for once, I believe that we need to stop living in the fool's paradise. The only way of supporting the Kashmiris, apart from the political, diplomatic and moral support is by upbringing what the United Nations has given to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. That is the right of resistance by the barrel of the gun.
All right. Do you feel India will honor the long-standing commitment that it made when it first went to the United Nations for the resolution of the Kashmir dispute in the 1940s? Might I remind our viewers? Do you feel this long-standing commitment on the Kashmir issue can reverberate again in India? And if so, what are the tactics that can be used by maybe United Nations or, well, OIC? We've seen the rebuttal by India, but what about the other important organizations? What about the Quad, for example? What about G20 or G7?
Absolutely.
Do you feel they can exert pressure on India?
See, I will take your word for it. And one of the most important channels that we can go through with is the civil society of India itself. Lately, I was going through the newspapers, and there were a few quotations saying that supporters of terrorism have been snubbed today, and they were pointing out Arundhati Roy. And she essentially is a very, very, very reliable and very renowned name in the Indian mainland India. So I believe this civil society of India can actually help us bringing up the voices of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the curbed voices. But as far as the political face of India is concerned, as far as the leadership is concerned, I believe this is another accomplishment of the manifesto of BJP. Narendra Modi is going to contest the next election, telling the people that, look, whatever we did, the whole world or Pakistan considered this to be as illegal, but now we have a legal cover. The Supreme Court of India has given us the legality. So this is another evidence that the black coats residing and sitting on the benches of the so-called eminem of judiciary in India is essentially biased, is essentially the follower and promulgator of RSS ideology. This is going to help Narendra Modi once again in accomplishing the dream of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru back then, who was absolutely not in the favor of a free, impartial and fair plebiscite, till today, the illegal annexation of the state of Jammu and Kashmir with India.
Do you feel what is happening in Palestine, Dr. Mujahid, and the way also the world has reacted to it, which does not bode well for the moment, at least with the Palestinians? Do you feel India is kind of taking an example out of that leaf and trying to, simulate the same thing as far as Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is concerned? Do you feel that they have been emboldened by what is happening in Palestine also, that has led to this decision by the Supreme Court as far as Article 370 is concerned?
That's a very fine thin line to it. Once when we see Israel on one hand and on the other side we see the hegemonic India, we're going to see and understand that they are faces of the same coin. We essentially believe that they act in the same way whenever it comes to brutality, whenever it comes to oppression and suppression, and whenever it comes to the settler colonialism. We see that India and Israel are essentially following the same models. But also we must remember that the resistance exists. We exist because we resist, and that was what the people of Gaza, that is what Hamas had shown essentially back in October and November. This is where they woke up. This is where the people of Gaza, this is where Palestinians told Israel practically that whatever you do, this land is ours, and no matter how large an open air prison this may be, we are going to resist. This resistance is the key to our existence. And the resistance is not just by the barrel of the gun. The resistance is in the form of words, is in the form of letters, is in the form of articles, be it Manan Wani's articles, be it the barrel of the gun of Burhan Muzaffar Wani, or be it the words of Sayyid Ali Gillani Shaheed or Ashraf Khan Sehrai and the other numerous leaders who are being incarcerated in Tihar jail, Udhampur jail, and in the other jails as well.
Dr. Mujahid, you talk of this movement that resides in the hearts of the Kashmiri people. And of course, I understand that no matter how brutal the Indian forces or the Indian government becomes, they cannot remove that movement from the hearts of the Kashmiri people till the last Kashmiri stands in the Indian held valley. Similar is the case with Palestine as well. Does India understand that the right to self-determination is a movement and not just a struggle?
Very beautiful words used, very beautiful indeed. But to be really honest, once again over here, India is playing the ostrich move. For once, we understand that the Indian authorities are very much aware of whatever is going on in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. But on the other hand, we also see that India is supporting, financing, sponsoring different media groups over there. India is essentially trying to bring on concerts. India is trying to bring on family galas in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir.
Look what happened with G20. You know, that was a disaster when they had this meeting in closed doors with the leaders. That even the big leaders did not attend that meeting because they knew the truth behind it.
Explicitly exposed. Many of the countries, they didn't join in, and in fact the tourist visit that they had planned for Pahalgam and Gulmarg, that was cancelled. So we need to understand, we in fact already do understand, but the Indians need to understand that this is a movement, just like you said.
You know, you talk of cancelling, you also know that Joe Biden has for the moment cancelled or postponed his visit to India. He was supposed to be the chief guest on the Indian Republic Day. And so yes, and as a result of this, the Quad summit that was to be held has also been postponed. A lot of cancellations that are happening. Do you feel that the West is slowly and steadily realizing that the decisions that it took vis-a-vis India were not in the right vein, and there might be a change as far as their policy towards India is concerned, or pressure tactics towards India on India, so that it kind of comes back to the pre-2019 era, especially when it comes to AJK, and then of course lets the people decide what they want to do as far as
and I believe the first step was taken by Canada. We need to understand that Hardeep Singh Najjar was a Canadian, yes, but he was a Sikh as well. You wouldn't say that he was what we usually term as the white guys. He wasn't one of them as such, but Canadian authorities took a stand.
Because he was their national. Absolutely. And he was on their soil when he was
this is the thing that India was, however, brought to court in a sense that India was asked about it. And not only Canada essentially told the other countries about it as well, the European countries, the United States as well. And right now we understand that another attempt to murder of the Panun Singh, the one who represents the
Canadian and US national.
Yes, another attempt was made onto him, essentially.
And that is why the FBI chief visited New Delhi very recently.
So this is where we understand that in one way or the other, India is somehow being brought to a light, the criminal light, that India is essentially violating the sovereignty of other countries as well, be it Pakistan. In fact, we already know that, we have evidences of it. But now the other countries, such as Canada or the European states, and even United States has proofs of it as well. So perhaps one day I believe and understand that if India considers itself so bold, that India considers itself
India considers itself a superpower, very bold, the big brother in the region. Absolutely. Have you seen the recent statements concerning Azad Jammu and Kashmir that were made post a decision by the Supreme Court?
Oh yes. But we need to understand that all these bold statements essentially come back to India in a very negative way. This is what has happened back when India attacked Pakistan in 2019, the so-called surgical strike, and we had Abhinandan to prove whatever India had done.
And look how Pakistan reacted when it came to Abhinandan.
Absolutely, that was a very peace-friendly element. So this is where we need to understand that this happens when countries are involved. As far as the Kashmiris are concerned, as far as the people on the ground, perhaps they do have some grievances, not with India. Because we never have considered India as a country who we are with. We are with Pakistan essentially. We are with the ideology of Pakistan. And so therefore we believe that this is the time has come that we must stop living in the fool's paradise. This is the time where we need to give India the answer in the very same language that India deserves.
Now that the elections in India are about to happen in a couple of months' time, do you feel that the attitude of the Indian leadership and the Indian forces towards the people in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir will further be intensified?
Uh, well, reading BJP and the way Narendra Modi has been working over the past years, I believe that this is the part where the government of India is going to go a little soft on Kashmiris.
Okay.
Yes. This is where the people are going to be brought in with the lollipop of development, roads, institutes, schools and colleges, scholarships and jobs. This is where the government of India is going to essentially provide the people with lands, be it the mainland Indians or the Kashmiris themselves, or be it the Biharis, and bringing them to Kashmir, settling them in Kashmir and awarding them with the domiciles so that they can vote.
But that
as
has
a
been
Kashmiri.
happening since quite some time now. The number of domicile
Ever since
certificates that have been
2019,
issued.
definitely. But even in fact, the mainland Indians who are being brought in as settler colonials, but the people of Jammu and Kashmir, the BJP government is going to go a little soft on them. This is what we inferred from the speech of Narendra Modi, or in fact his tweets as well, where he said that the abolishment of Article 35A and 370, even by the Supreme Court now, is going to bring development, happiness and joys to
Yes,
the
I
people
read
of
that as
Jammu
well.
and Kashmir.
But will the Kashmiris look beyond the sham?
They always have. They always have, Omar. For the past more than 70 years, having sacrificed more than 600,000 Kashmiris in the way of Kashmiri freedom struggle, in the way of getting a free, impartial and fair plebiscite, the Kashmiris have given more than 600,000 lives. They have given more than 12,000 women who were raped. They have given more than 100,000 kids who were orphaned. The terms half widows, the terms half orphans, they have not been coined in Palestine or in any other conflict zone.
In illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir.
Is the Indian illegally occupied.
And you know, almost 100,000 people have lost their lives, have been martyred by India since the whole movement began. And the fact also is that despite the pressure tactics or the brutalities that Indian forces or the Indian government perpetrates on the Kashmiris will continue to fight for their right to self-determination.
Absolutely.
We've seen the resolve, and we'll continue to see the resolve strengthening with every passing day, because this is not just mere words. These are not just mere statements. This has been proven time and again by the Kashmiris, their leadership, and the Kashmiri people.
The only thing that we need to focus on is essentially that India is going to change its strategies, its tactics. It's going to improve them. It's going to cloak them under some bizarre kind of a development lollipop. But I believe that the world must understand, because the Kashmiris and Pakistan already understands what Indian tactics are. But the world needs to understand that whatever India is doing in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir are organized war crimes and human rights violations.
And that is for this particular reason, that our caretaker Prime Minister Anwar Kakar Sahab was in Azad Jammu and Kashmir and met with the leadership and addressed the Legislative Assembly to show Pakistan's support, that Pakistan stands with its Kashmiri brother and will continue to stand with its Kashmiri brethren and will continue to support it politically, morally and diplomatically. Thank you very much, Dr. Mujahid Gillani, to have joined us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you because you speak from the heart. Thank you. Let's come to our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns COP28. The 28th edition of COP ended in Dubai with representatives from really 200 countries agreeing to begin reducing global consumption of fossil fuels and avert the worst of climate change, apparently signaling the end of the oil age. Whether this happens or not is another thing altogether, but at least there is a first step in the right direction. Maryam Shabbir, reading Environmentalist, our regular guest on the show as well, joins us online. Thank you very much, Maryam, to have joined us. How was COP?
It was kind of mixed emotion, you can say, and if I could summarize in a sentence, I would say that COP28 was a win for oil and fossil fuel lobbies, and not for the climate change campaigners.
All right, but isn't this agreement signed on by 200 countries that apparently heralds the beginning of the end of the oil age?
Omar, if you look at the text which came out at the end of the COP28, the text really contradicts, it has like a variety, it gives a lot of options and, escapes for oil and fossil fuel companies, for terminologies like, phasing out instead of phasing down, phasing down instead of phasing out of fossil fuel. Then initially they tried to, insert reducing consumption and production by 2050. And if you look on the other side as well, they have set like targets for every, like globally, for meeting the targets, like globally for every country, like uniform targets. It's like it's not possible. Like literally, you are like, on the one hand there are like developed countries, on the other hand there are like developing countries. How do you expect from developing countries, without providing funds, technology and capacities to meet the same kind of targets, like uniform targets for everybody? And also it has like the first week of COP28, there was like really celebratory for climate change campaigners, because the establishment of loss and damage fund was introduced. But then as you move forward, the contribution to that fund by the developed world is like, it's not even peanuts. So it's like really, you can say that it's like only 0.4% of what they should be giving on annual basis to the developing world. It's like literally nothing, and it doesn't say what is the plan, how they are going to contribute to it, who is going to make them accountable. There are like lots of loopholes when you read the COP28 text, which came out on the last day in the closing plenary of COP28. So it gives a lot of escapes and a lot of logics to the developed world to keep using fossil fuels and keep using oil companies, especially US and Saudi Arabia. They were like major blockers in climate change negotiations. And on the other hand, if you look at the China and India, they also didn't really contributed well when it comes to commitments of reducing fossil fuels, or it should not be at this stage, should not be actually reducing, but it should be like phasing out fossil fuels. But the language has been tilted a lot, which gives a lot of escapes to the developing world to keep using oil and fossil fuels actually.
Maryam, this said, I'd like to refer to what COP28 President Sultan Al-Jaber said. He called the deal historic. He said that its true success would be in its implementation. Even if we reduce fossil fuels, that would be the beginning of a step in the right direction, wouldn't it? Then it can lead to phasing out, but at least start reducing, start working in that direction. Do you feel that work will begin at least to reduce the emissions?
Well, Omar, I don't think so. This is something to celebrate, because developing countries have been fighting from past 30 years to include terms like phasing out instead of phasing down, or reducing consumption and production. Those were like strong terminologies when it comes to doing that. And after like spending 30 years with developed world to keep negotiating with them, at COP28 they had to alter the text. This is like putting an end to the efforts of the developing world, which they won't stop. They will keep fighting for their rights and for climate injustice. But I think this is like too late to introduce such kind of terms into the text, which gives, again, I would say that escape to the developed world, that to use oil and fossil fuel, keep using oil and fossil fuels, and they don't have like if you can take example of US, they are like biggest user of fossil fuels. John Kerry over there at COP28, he was kind of into negotiation of to try to convince other countries to reduce fossil fuels consumption. But on the other hand, in his own homeland country, they keep using and increasing fossil fuel consumption, and keep with the help of with the support of White House over here. So it's what you say and what you do and what you want to do with your oil and fossil fuels when it comes to a developed world, and developing country would keep suffering the way they are doing. So in my view, these terminologies are these are not really encouraging. Actually, it gives more room to the developed world to keep using oil and fossil fuels as business as usual.
So, Maryam, what happens to the developing world now? On the one hand, you yourself talk of the loss and damage fund that had been operationalized in the very beginning of COP28, but then nothing concrete has happened since then. You talk about 0.4%, which is, and I understand it's less than peanuts as far as the help that the developing world needs, especially countries like Pakistan who bear the brunt of climate change, being no emitters themselves, less than 1%. What happens? What's the fate of the developing nations then post COP28? Should we be waiting for COP29 to happen, or should the developing countries now make a consensus of their own to move forward in the right? What should happen? What do you suggest?
I think so far, whatever is the success related to loss and damage fund, I mean, it has been announced now that, it will be operationalized, because from past 1 year, ever since after the COP27, committees were working on it, like transitional committees and everybody in it. So whatever very small amount of funds the developed world has announced to, contribute to it, I think it's time for developing countries to at least start chasing developed world. Right now, they have only announced at COP28, so they should really follow up. The government should really follow up with those small amounts as well with the developed world. That fund should be reaching out to each country, like only 0.4% funds, whatever they have announced so far, the developed world. It should start reaching in every country like Pakistan, like other vulnerable small islands and developing countries. At least, we need to keep working towards it. And also under Paris Agreement, we need to push, developed world, keep pushing developed world for renewables, or moving away from fossil fuels, like technology transfer, clean technology transfer to developing countries. Also, capacity building when it comes to, renewable sources or, clean technologies. I think it's time to, keep pushing developed world, whatever they have committed, just keep following up with them until COP29, and because the COPs are the only, conference of parties are the only platform available. A lot of people criticize that, a lot of people fly over there, they burn fossil fuel, they fly on planes and reach over there. But the thing is, there is no other platform to make these countries accountable. This is the only platform where you make countries sit and negotiate with them for new targets. And also this, the one thing which I forgot to mention, which is a very sad outcome of the COP28, is that this COP encouraged actually the carbon sequestration techniques, which is like still in experimental phase, and it's so far it's not that much effective. That's what the research says, which means that the developed world will keep using fossil fuels and oils and will keep relying on those inefficient technologies for capturing carbon. So there are lots of ways to just keep chasing them, just keep putting pressure in them, and a lot of relevant stakeholders can build pressure on them when it comes to like youth, media, civil society, climate campaigners. We would keep chasing developed world to end fossil fuels. And I think it's a long way. I don't see it happening very near, because they are not ready to even phase down fossil fuels in their own countries and moving away from fossil fuel and move towards renewables by the developed world.
Okay, so what it means to say in a nutshell is that pledges made, but these pledges don't seem to move in the right direction as far as action is concerned, and it's going to be a long way ahead. A lot of COPs later, that maybe some concrete evidence of light at the end of the tunnel might be seen. You talked about the small island states, Maryam. I'd like to refer to what the lead negotiator for the Alliance of Small Nation States, Island States, Anne Rasmussen, said. She criticized the deal as unambitious. She also said that we have made an incremental advancement over business as usual. Then what we really need is an exponential step change in our actions. This is exactly what you've also been saying. So do you feel that these small island nations, developing nations, are still remain at the mercy of climate change and still remain at the mercy of the fossil fuel emissions by the developed nations, and will continue to do so. And we will see more of events happening in countries such as Pakistan or other countries, and then we'll again have pledges, and those pledges will again not be translated into action. So it's a very vicious circle, isn't it?
Exactly, Omar. Exactly, you're very right. And whatever the climate change campaigners and rest of the people whose thoughts resonate with mine, is this, we have the same feeling actually, because when they are not moving away from fossil fuels, that means the temperature would keep rising, the earth would keep warming up. The only difference is that it makes the climate change makes more vulnerable the developing countries or underdeveloped countries. Developed world have like resources, they have resources to tackle those issues, but not on a larger scale. I would say when it comes to flooding, yes, they can take a lot of measures to control the damage, but when it comes to heat waves, for example, every year in California, in the US, and the rest of the part of the world around the globe, they also suffer, but still they have resources to minimize the damage. And of course, the debate on 1.5 degree is no more.
It's no longer going to be 1.5 degrees, Maryam. If the way things are going, it's going to be 2.5, and as per some climate analysts, also 3 to 3.5 degrees increase.
Absolutely. The dependency on fossil fuel and oil is, it will create disasters for the whole world, but particularly for developing and underdeveloping countries, it's going to be a disaster, like flooding and heat waves. A lot of other climate change phenomena would keep happening, and we don't have resources, we don't have adaptation and mitigation measures in place, and because that involves capacity, clean technology, and finance, to tackle with these issues. And I don't see developed world contributing much to that funds which developing countries need on annual basis. For example, the damage from floods in 2022 in Pakistan was only $30 billion, and what developed world has contributed to loss and damage fund is, it's like only 0.4% of what every country needs, just not Pakistan, but every country needs. So,
all right. Maryam, we have a slight disturbance as far as your side of the conversation is concerned. We're going to get back to you as soon as this issue is resolved. That was Maryam Shabbir, environmentalist, talking to us about COP28. She wasn't happy or optimistic as far as the outcome of COP28 is concerned. That is her point of view as well. But she also outlined that there was no proper talk as far as phasing down of fossil fuels emission is concerned. There was there was a talk of reduction of fossil fuel emission, but the right wordings or the right statements were not, as far as she is saying, were not given as at the end of COP28 as per this statement that has been signed by 200 countries. But there seems to be a lot of optimism as far as many other countries and many analysts are concerned, who call this first global agreement to ditch fossil fuels as a step in the right direction. But there's also one fact that a lot of people talk about, and that is the addiction of many of the important players in the world or countries to fossil fuel. It is also not an easy task to remove their addiction as far as fossil fuel or fossil fuel production is concerned. And of course, there are different industries that are attached to this. For them to completely dump fossil fuel emission will take some time and a lot of determination, but I think that is what is required in this day and age, in this time when there are countries across the world, developed and developing alike, that are bearing the brunt of the effects of climate change. Pakistan has seen one of the worst kinds of the effects last year. We also saw other effects previously as well, and we don't know what is in store for Pakistan in the coming years because of this fact. Maryam Shabbir joins us back. Maryam, so I did highlight while we were trying to reconnect with you on your lack of optimism as far as the outcome of COP28 is concerned. What now? COP28 has ended, the agreement has been made, but the statements or the wording of the agreement is not something that raises high hopes. A lot of articles have been written that say that this is the first global agreement to ditch fossil fuels, a step in the right direction. But of course, you've been there, so you understand a lot of the things that we don't, because we read through it, we don't know what was actually going on at COP28, and you were there firsthand. What now after COP28? What should now be the responsibility of the developed countries and the developing nations as well?
I think, Omar, the conversation goes back to, introducing these strong terminologies when it comes to, ending fossil fuels. And that would set the right direction for the developed world, to really stop using fossil fuels. We understand that, developed world depend on fossil fuels for their economy, but developing countries have given them a long time, to really move away from fossil fuels and to move towards renewables and, do their job. And provide climate justice to the developing world because of the consequences of climate change they have created for us, and I think we need sort of more activism, which was kind of I would say not allowed that much at COP28, and 13-year-old climate activist, when she tried to disrupt a high-level plenary by saying slogan, end fossil fuels, and she was detained for 30 minutes by the securities. It's minor, and also her badge for COP28 was, it was like banned. She was banned to enter in the venue, and that speaks a lot itself for the fossil fuel lobbies and the governments sitting over there, that they are afraid of just only 13 years old, and the voices kind of were tried to minimize. So we would say that there were lots of peaceful protests that was allowed or registered by the participants over there, but the kind of activism which we see on different COPs was not seen at COP28, even when a lot of organizations, civil society organizations, were registering deliberately. UAE government, gave very minimal seats to all the civil society organizations, so that a lot of climate activists should not be joining. And there were lots of climate activists, and sitting in negotiations. Some journalists, their badges were also, taken down. The reason for mentioning all this over here is that, it speaks a lot of the kind of influence which oil and fossil fuel lobbies have, and our voices were trying to, shut down at COP28 UAE, and I think this should not happen. This should be a kind of lesson learned for COP presidencies to, not really shut down our voices, and should not the fossil and oil lobbies should not be dominating at such COPs, but they should be held accountable. And I think developing countries as a bloc should keep putting efforts and keep trying to push developed world for ending their fossil fuels, and to contribute especially to loss and damage fund and to clean technology transfer and towards capacity
highlighted
building.
Even post COP28, I think, Maryam, even post COP28, we need to move in the right direction. We need to continue, as you said, exerting pressure on the developed world, so that at least the actions that have been pledged might come to fruition, and then baby steps, if not big steps, and at least baby steps in the right direction. I like the word activism that you've used many a times during our conversation. I think activism is the right word, pre, during and post COP28, that we need to keep in mind while working towards a climate friendly world. Thank you very much, Maryam Shabbir, to have joined us and to have talked to us about your point of view as far as COP28 is concerned. Let's come to our last three stories very quickly. The US House of Representatives has voted on Wednesday to formalize an impeachment inquiry into their President Joe Biden, escalating Republicans' battle with Democrats ahead of the 2024 elections. Remember, next year is election time in the US. In a move that Biden himself slams as a baseless stunt, the vote of 221 to 212 was along strict party lines, with every Republican voting for it and every Democrat against. Let's see where all of this goes as well. Next is, of course, it all is based on the case of his son, Hunter Biden, whose personal life and business dealings have become a magnet for right-wing conspiracy theories and media investigations. Next, US Defense Ministry has been fined for Afghan data breach during the Taliban takeover. The British data regulator said that it had fined the Defense Ministry for a series of small email breaches that revealed details of over 265 Afghans who were seeking relocation to Britain after the Taliban took control of the country. The Information Commissioner's Office said it had fined the Ministry of Defence £350,000, saying the department did not have the operating procedures in hand or in place to ensure that these group emails that had been sent securely to the Afghan nationals who had worked for or with the British government remain secure. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, let's end today's show with the positive note about robotic arms. Scientists in Switzerland are testing an extra robotic arm. You can see the visual right in the parallel window that is controlled by breathing. And that is very interesting, you know. You can now control robotic arms with breathing. Anyways, without affecting our ability to do other things at the same time. It is still in the process of experimenting upon, but it is a step in the right direction. So many new innovations that happen. I wish that the world, works solely towards innovations for a better world, innovations for the people, innovations for a climate-friendly world, innovations for less, conflicts and less wars, and more, and creating an environment where the people across the world and our future generations can live in peace. We need more of these extra robotic arms in the political world as well, maybe. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new story segments that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. Allah Hafiz.